Johnny Cash was more than just a country music singer. He was an American legend whose deep, resonant voice could soothe troubled souls and stir the hearts of countless listeners. Some remember him best by his hits like Ring of Fire, which carried a certain raw spirit of love and heartbreak, or by his haunting interpretation of Hurt, which revealed layers of vulnerability few had seen before in the twilight of his life. Yet beyond these iconic songs, there was a profoundly human story. He was a steadfast friend to fellow musicians, a spiritual seeker with struggles he never denied, and a man who ultimately lost the love of his life, June Carter Cash, shortly before his own passing. Today, as we look back on Johnny's later years, we're reminded that his journey wasn't just about catchy tunes or chart success. It was about an unbreakable link between artist and audience. The threads of faith, love, and suffering that shaped him into the man in black. And in remembering him, we honor the lessons he left behind about resilience, redemption, and the immeasurable value of loving honestly until the end. Johnny Cash, born Johnny Ray Cash on February 26, 1932 in Kingsland, Arkansas, was an American singer-songwriter. His roots reach back into the golden era of country music. By the 1950s, country was fast evolving, weaving heartfelt storytelling with the folk traditions of the American South. Johnny stepped into this world just as it began to boom, with Nashville turning into a major recording hub and record labels searching for the next big sound. But the country scene back then wasn't just about sentimental ballads and steel guitars. It was an ever-expanding tapestry that included gospel influences, rockabilly beats, and heartfelt anthems of the everyday worker. Johnny rose to prominence alongside other giants, yet his gift for blending sorrowful undertones with spiritual reflection set him apart. He soon became not just a star, but a legend, crossing over into the hearts of both country faithful and mainstream audiences. Though he never belonged to New Hollywood cinema, his timeline overlapped with the revolutionary spirit of the 1960s and 1970s. The New Hollywood era changed how films were made, how stories were told, and how audiences responded to raw, unfiltered truth. Johnny Cash shared in this spirit of reinvention by doing in music what those bold directors and actors did in film. Much like the cinematic icons who emerged from that period, personalities such as Jack Nicholson or Jane Fonda, Johnny brought authenticity and grit to the forefront. He refused to be confined by stereotypes of what a country singer ought to be. His voice was a clarion call for the misunderstood, the imprisoned, the forgotten. This willingness to sing for the invisible corners of society forged a lasting influence that extended well beyond the charts. The breadth of Johnny's career was enormous, filled with chart-topping songs, mesmerizing live performances, and unforgettable collaborations. Early hits like I Walk the Line introduced him to a national audience, while Folsom Prison Blues gave listeners a stark, compassionate view of those behind bars. That second song, performed live at Folsom Prison in 1968, became one of his signature moments. Audiences responded to his empathy for the downtrodden, and critics marveled at how he could unify a room of hardened inmates and everyday music fans under one raw human experience. Still, there are lesser-known gems in his catalog, like The Junkie and The Juicehead Minus Me, a playful tune that explored personal difficulties through a comedic lens, and Destination Victoria Station, a concept album released as a promotional piece for a restaurant chain, which, while never a commercial triumph, stands as a quirky example of Johnny's adventurous spirit. These less publicized works reveal that while he was a superstar, he also had an experimental side, unafraid to try new paths to connect with people. Another rarely mentioned project is his guest spot on the television series Columbo, where he portrayed a country singer with a dark secret. Even though it was just a one-off dramatic role, fans who followed his every move saw him bring that same authentic depth to acting that he channeled so naturally into his music. Moments like these showcase how Johnny was always searching for fresh ways to share his stories. He was never content to be pigeonholed solely as a singer. There was an artist within him who recognized that life itself offered endless avenues for creativity, whether in a film cameo on stage, at a prison, or at a modest roadside diner. As decades passed, new generations discovered Johnny Cash in different ways. Some knew him by the flamboyant sound of Ring of Fire, others by his deep baritone introductions during the 1969 to 1971 run of the Johnny Cash Show on national television. This show, broadcast from Nashville, introduced mainstream audiences to country icons and rising talents across many genres, bridging the gap between old-school country, rock, and even folk revival. Singers like Bob Dylan appeared on his stage, sparking crossovers that still shape modern American music. Johnny's brand of music was always about bridging divides between rock and country, between prisoner and free citizen, between sinner and saint. In that sense, he became a living testament to how art can unify us, no matter our differences. His personal life, of course, was never simple or straightforward. Even in his prime, Johnny struggled with addiction, particularly amphetamines and barbiturates, a habit that tugged at the seams of his relationships. The 1960s saw him nearing rock bottom. He once recounted driving a tractor in circles while high, risking his life. But it was also at this low point that he found renewed faith and a deepened sense of purpose, thanks in large part to his eventual wife, June Carter. The redemption he experienced in those years became a central theme in his music, one that resonated with individuals searching for hope amidst their own failings. It wasn't just show business hype. He had walked the roads of personal darkness and kept going, forging a new path with more compassion and humility. Years turned into decades, and the industry around him shifted. The 1980s saw a country music landscape leaning into glossy production, pop-inflected hooks, and music videos that could make or break a single. Johnny's style, though timeless, seemed out of step with the MTV generation. Around that time, he parted ways with longtime label Columbia Records, leading some critics to wonder if his best days were behind him. Cash himself refused to believe that. What kept him alive creatively was his restless soul, his unquenchable desire to sing truths that only life's trials can reveal. Though the mainstream pop charts might have seen him as a relic of a different era, his live shows remained must-see events for devout fans. They understood that the shimmering sincerity of the man in black didn't vanish simply because radio's tastes had moved on. He continued to record steadily, but label executives increasingly saw him as a nostalgia act. Then came his partnership with producer Rick Rubin in the early 1990s, a union that reignited his spark. Rubin, known for working with rock and rap artists, recognized a timeless authenticity in Cash's voice. Together they stripped everything down, focusing on acoustic arrangements and raw vocal power. The first album in that collaboration, American Recordings, 1994, was a revelation. It won a Grammy and reminded the world that Johnny Cash's talent and message were not bound by generation or genre. He recorded songs by modern rock acts, gave them his trademark style, and introduced younger listeners to the heartbreak and honesty that had always defined him. This second win was not just about records sold. It was about a legacy of truth-telling through music. Even critics who had dismissed him as outdated found themselves praising the elemental power of these late-era recordings. In that same era, fans and friends alike witnessed how his tender relationship with June Carter Cash was like an anchor for his soul. Their love story had been public for decades. She wrote Ring of Fire about the fiery passion she felt for him, and they performed side by side in numerous concerts. In these later years, June's presence seemed to steady Johnny's spirit more than ever. She radiated compassion and humor, often teasing him on stage about everything from his pranks to his moody introspection. In quiet moments back home, they prayed together, read the Bible, and spent countless hours just cherishing the quiet, shared warmth of having traversed so many storms hand in hand. Despite renewed creative energy, Johnny was not immune to the physical toll that time and past addictions exact. Heart problems, diabetic complications, and a persistent debilitating nerve condition slowly sapped his strength. In interviews, he'd sometimes smile through visible pain, never wanting to dwell on his personal struggles. Indeed, he kept recording and performing whenever possible, continuing to fuse old hymns with contemporary material, an instinctive blend of the sacred and the everyday, reminiscent of the tensions that had always defined him. Close friends report that while Johnny Cash maintained a stoic exterior, in his final years he often spoke intimately about mortality. He would recall times he narrowly escaped death during drug binges in the past, or how close he felt to God in moments of despair. Those who saw him in backstage green rooms mention how he would sit with his guitar, quietly humming a tune while collecting his thoughts, sometimes wiping away tears before going out to greet fans. It was as if the weight of his life, both the regrets and the triumphs, were converging in those final moments. He wasn't afraid to reflect on his own fragility. He only wished to use whatever time he had left to keep connecting with hearts across the world. June Carter Cash's death in May of 2003 was a devastating blow that cut right to his core. They had been married for 35 years, and though they weathered storms, each had found in the other a partner who illuminated life's most profound joys. Johnny's health took a more serious downturn immediately after she passed. Some close to him believe that heartbreak from losing June inflicted more damage than any illness could. In his final recordings, including his deeply stirring version of Trent Reznor's Hurt, one can hear an almost unbearable sense of grief and acceptance, as though he was grappling with mortality in real time. This rawness touched listeners worldwide. Even those who knew nothing else about his catalog stopped and listened, feeling the honesty that poured out with every trembling note. His last few months on Earth were marked by persistent hospital visits, a swirl of media speculation, and an outpouring of support from fans of all ages. Younger admirers expressed astonishment that a man in his 70s, with so many decades of experience behind him, could speak so directly to universal pain. Many said they felt as though he was telling them, "I know how you feel, and you're not alone." Family members observed that even as his body weakened, his spirit held firm to a faith that had sustained him through years of adversity. Some old acquaintances, however, shook their heads in sorrow, blaming the music industry for ignoring him during the parts of the 80s, only to celebrate him again when Rick Rubin offered him a new platform. The complicated reality is that Johnny never fit perfectly into any corporate blueprint, but in the end, his artistry transcended commercial trends and refused to be limited by them. Beyond health challenges, controversies, and debates persisted right up until his passing. Cash had always been outspoken, whether in support of Native American rights or standing up for prison reform. Toward the end, some critics questioned his approach to covering modern rock and alternative songs, suggesting it might be a gimmick orchestrated by Rubin. Others argued that Johnny had always played around with different styles. After all, he once performed with Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis during the Sun Records days, and he never shied away from a good collaboration. Meanwhile, fans of Nine Inch Nails, whose track Hurt he famously covered, found themselves rethinking what the song could mean in the hands of a country music elder statesman. The entire conversation highlighted Cash's complexity. He was a devout Christian who empathized with the marginalized and embraced creative risks. Debates on whether he was pure country or something more will likely continue for decades. As the final days loomed, doctors urged him to rest. Friends, bandmates, and family provided emotional support around the clock. According to one story, a close friend arrived at his bedside to find him clutching June's photograph, softly singing Jackson, a duet they had performed countless times. "I can't wait to see her again," he supposedly whispered. Despite the sorrow, there was also a palpable peace. He knew his time had come, but he believed deeply in a reunion beyond this life. This unshakable faith, combined with a longing for the companion he had lost, gave him a quiet sense of acceptance. The man who had once howled about loneliness in "I Still Miss Someone" was preparing to face that loneliness no longer. Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, just 4 months after losing June. His passing sent ripples of grief through the country music community and far beyond. Rock fans, pop stars, and gospel choirs alike recognized that an era of genuine artistry had ended. People placed flowers outside the gates of the Hendersonville estate, where Johnny and June had spent much of their lives. Radio stations paid tribute by playing marathon broadcasts of his greatest hits, and fans from around the globe poured out messages of condolences online. A sense of universal mourning emerged, akin to what happens when the world loses a figure whose life had, in some way, connected us all. The question some might ask is, why should we, especially older viewers, still care so deeply about Johnny's final years and the heartbreak he endured? The answer could be found in the millions of shared personal stories from individuals who felt seen and heard through his music. A veteran might say that Ballad of Ira Hayes made them feel understood in their struggles. A recovering addict might confide that Hurt gave them hope and reminded them it's never too late to confront your demons. A deeply spiritual person might cling to his gospel tracks, cherishing the sincerity of a man whose faith was forged in hardship and shaped by boundless compassion. His later life, fraught with health issues and the despair of losing June, highlights a universal truth. No matter how famous or beloved, we are all mortal and we all experience loss. But Johnny refused to turn that pain inward alone. He let the world see it. He recorded new music while tears were barely dried on his face. He wasn't afraid to show that even a tough icon like him could be shattered by grief. In an age where so many of us hide behind digital facades, his willingness to bear his anguish and faith stands as an enduring lesson. It calls us to authenticity, to the belief that sharing our vulnerabilities can be a gateway to healing. Historically, Johnny's final period of work with Rick Rubin, often referred to as the American Recordings phase, has come to represent a masterclass in artistic rejuvenation. It shaped the way many older artists approached late career albums, showing that authenticity can break through even when radio isn't receptive. The tremendous success of Hurt on MTV and across media platforms in 2003 proved that heartfelt honesty trumps trends. Younger musicians took note. For instance, rock and indie artists were subsequently more open to bridging generational gaps, inviting older musicians for collaborations or tributes. The resulting synergy gave birth to new audiences discovering the classics and older audiences appreciating modern interpretations of time-honored themes. Let us celebrate his final years not just as a tearful goodbye, but as a loving, powerful example of resilience, of how a voice forged in the flames of adversity can still ring out with clarity and grace even as the darkness closes in. The man in black may have left this world, but his spirit endures, echoing in hearts that dare to believe that through every storm, something beautiful can still emerge. And in that enduring belief lies the essence of Johnny Cash's life, legacy, and final years. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.